certain security enhancements and projects that Minister of Defense Israel Katz is considering with regards to Yudan Shomron, Judea and Samaria, and the border with Jordan and other issues?
Israel Katz just made two visits to Yehuda and Shomron, mostly the Shomron, where he made two rather interesting statements, policy statements. The first involves his announcement that we are going to be building a 450-kilometer fence running from basically the Galil down the Jordan River Valley, down through the Arava, all the way down to Eilat. That's well and good. And by the way, to back up that fence with Nahal type outposts along the line. Okay, that sounds great. And maybe I think it's close to $5 billion that it's going to cost us. And in and of itself, I mean, that's, well and good, because the arms suppliers are just driving across the border right now.
Yeah, it has to be made clear that there is in fact no eastern border. It's a joke. There is no.
There really isn't.
Border.
It is a joke. The Jordanians have absolutely done nothing of any significance to stop both the infiltration of terrorists and weapons into Yehuda and Shomron. Nothing. They're useless. My first reaction when I heard this was, well, it's better than nothing. But then again, I thought, you don't eliminate a threat by adopting a defensive posture. Totally. We found that on October 7th. There comes a point in time where somebody has to pick up the phone to that Hashemite dwarf in Amman and tell him point blank, you're one bullet away from joining your grandfather. One bullet. You either use your army, use your military to secure our border from your side, or you're on your own. And we'll take whatever steps we deem appropriate to defend our border across the border. I don't believe either the separation barrier or the fence along Gaza, or even this fence, this 450-kilometer long fence, in and of themselves, accomplishes much of anything. They have to be defended. So they said, well, terrorism has died down because of the defensive line we built, the barrier we built along, Yehuda and Shomron. Well, I hate to say this, it's only succeeded because the enemy hasn't taken advantage of how weak it is. I mean, I've got videos that I turn my stomach over of hundreds, literally hundreds of Arabs from Yehuda and Shomron, just very nonchalantly putting a ladder up on the wall, the separation barrier that Sharon basically built, and just calmly walking over with big packages. And they're operating in military-style units. Where are they? Who knows? I haven't seen anybody going back, so they're still here. Within pre-1967 Israel. So, what is it that we could do quickly to secure Yehuda and Shomron? Well, first of all, we have to stop all traffic coming from Jordan. You just stop it. If you want to leave, you can leave. But all traffic coming in across the Jordan from Jordan has to stop. That's one thing. We have these terror cities like Jenin and Tulkarem and Kalkilia that we're again mowing the grass in. These cities have to be destroyed and the populations deported. Syria, Jordan, who cares? Thirdly, one thing that nobody is talking, and the government is talking about, is the Palestinian Authorities' propaganda mills, both electronic and print, which are inciting their population to murder Jews, has got to be taken out kinetically. No more newspapers, no more radio broadcasts, no more internet, no more TV. We have enough weapons to do that. And one building in particular, the building that manages the Pay for Slay program, it's the Office of Prisoner Affairs in Ramallah. Everything is there in that building, the computers, the information, everything. This is the organization, the building that distributes the money to the murderers and their families. That building, one morning, when it's filled, not before work, but when it's filled, has to just disappear. Okay? He isn't doing this, Katz. These are part and parcel of what I call a decisive campaign to destroy and uproot and destroy terror emanating from these cities and the PA. The other thing he did, apart from announce this 450-kilometer fence, was he acknowledged the fact that we need additional settlements in the Shomron in particular to reestablish a level of security that will protect both people in the Shomron and across the seam line. Okay, now think about this for a minute. I contacted the relevant people in the Kiryat. And I said, I have a question for the defense minister. He wants additional settlements. There are 4 settlements in the northern Shomron that were abandoned during the misnamed disengagement. Legislation has been passed allowing us to repopulate them. Why doesn't he simply act on that? And the answer, and you pointed this out before in the discussions we had before we went on live, was, well, Bibi is the one that has to authorize that, and the defense minister implements it. When I went to one of them with Yossi Dagan 2 years ago, to his home, his abandoned home, village after village that we went through were like Jenin. This seething mass of hatred that you could feel as we drove through in buses. I suggested that the entire area surrounding these 4 abandoned yeshuvim, settlements, if you want to call them that, whatever.
Jewish towns, Jewish towns, villages,
be depopulated. That the Arab inhabitants in this region, which have been subjected to decades of PA incitement, be deported either to Jordan or to Syria. And that whole region in the northern Shomron be turned into Area C with a new defense line. The fence can go there. And what this would do is it would safeguard the southern Galil from enemy infiltration, with these 4 communities rebuilt and with additional communities that could be built very quickly in the area. I was told that that's not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. I said, what's the problem with repopulating 4 communities that were essentially illegally abandoned? And I didn't get an answer for that. So these are 2 highly publicized statements, one of intent with regard to the 450 kilometer long security fence, and this admission that what we really need are more settlements for security's sake. And the army, by the way, crazy enough, supported that. The notion of more settlements. They supported, well, of course, because it makes their job a lot easier. But we're not basically going to have security in Yehuda and Shomron when you have people like, well, Ron Dermer, who has said in the past and who recently reiterated this fact that, well, we're just going to have to hope and pray that in the near future we'll be able to deal with a reformed Palestinian Authority that will let us live in peace. And this statement was made just recently to a very select group of people behind closed doors. His story is out, and they can deny it all they want. But the fact of the matter is, what he said, he has said consistently over the past few years, and I believe represents Bibi's actual feelings on the future of Yehuda and Shomron. On the issue of Gaza, he's willing to go along with whatever Trump wants. Just take the problem away from me. Take the problem off our hands. However, when it comes to Yehuda and Shomron, Bibi honestly has not retreated from that contemptible statement that he made at Bar-Ilan, where he acknowledged that there will be some kind of state there in our biblical heartland. So in spite of all of these, for example, these two statements by Israel Katz, I don't know exactly what's going to happen unless we get a new prime minister in that will actually act on the various ideas required to establish peace and security in Yehuda and Shomron. So,
with regards to Netanyahu's plans or what he's capable of doing or likely to do, we see time and again that he seems incapable of taking the necessary actions. Even when it comes to something as ostensibly straightforward and clearly necessary, crucial in fact, such as removing the so-called Attorney General. I say so-called because the post as it exists in Israel is unparalleled anywhere on earth.
It's a parallel government,
and it's more
with
than
veto rights.
It is a political player, the so-called Attorney General, which is also the so-called legal counsel for the cabinet, working in cahoots with the so-called High Court and the rest of the legal mafia. And I use the term legal mafia very advisedly. I would remind, yes, it is correct, it is precise. And I would remind everyone that former president of Israel, Rivlin, before he became president, this is going back 20 years or so, in an interview to the Haaretz newspaper, described the legal establishment in Israel as a mafia and a junta. Those were his words.
Correct.
And I have the article on my computer, so I could, if necessary, I can quote it word for word. He was fully aware of this. Then he became president. All of a sudden, he forgot everything that he'd learned. However, getting back to Netanyahu it's obvious that he must remove the so-called Attorney General from office. It is obvious that he must remove the head of the GSS, the Shabak, from his position, and many other such decisions must be taken.
Right.
And these matters have been discussed time and again for years. And he he's not doing anything. So one has to wonder why this is.
But go back again. We had a discussion about this before we went live, so to speak. He hasn't even applied the laws that are on the books to protect our communication lines, roads, bridges, airfields, ports, rail lines, etc. He's done nothing to uphold the rule of law. I was at one violent demonstration down on Aza, Rehov Aza, just outside his residence in Jerusalem. And I was just witnessing what was going on Motzi Shabbos. And they were throwing Molotov cocktails. The leftists were throwing Molotov cocktails at the prime minister's residence. And the police were doing nothing. And I went up to one police commander and I said to him, "What? This is not a peaceful demonstration. This is a violent assault on our democratically elected prime minister in his residence. Why don't you do something about this?" And he pointed to a civilian across the way and said, "Go tell him that." It's the security services guy. He's been told not to do anything and to have us desist from arresting anybody. Well, I didn't go over. I knew he was telling me the truth. And those instructions came straight from Bibi. They didn't come from anybody else. And I said, "Well, what about Ben Gvir?" I mean, at the time, he was the national security minister. He said, "He doesn't have any power. We don't follow what he says. That man over there is the one that controls everything here." It's what you've called the deep state. It's not that deep, but it's persistent. I would have no problem running on a party platform of disbanding the High Court and firing many of the judges that have been approved over the years. I would have no problem with basically firing the Attorney General and all the legal advisors that do her dirty work within the various ministries, possibly even indicting some of them for misuse of authority, and certainly disbanding, hopefully to reform the Judge Advocate General's Corps within the military. These are things that absolutely, if we're going to have a democracy in this country, or a semblance of a democracy, the juristocracy that has been ruling this country with hobnail boots ever since Aaron Barak pulled off his judicial coup d'etat some years ago, has got to be done. And the laws on the books to prevent sedition, treason in some cases, and anarchy have to be applied, period. And if a police commander or a security commander will not apply them, they go to jail. Plain and simple. If a government is elected in this country to do these things, no mob, no group cabal of left-wing politicians, no group of high-tech entrepreneurs, well-heeled entrepreneurs, should be allowed their freedom. They are breaking the law. They should be arrested and put away for a very long time. Let's remember, it wasn't so much that Bibi and his government were pursuing a judicial reform program that caused Hamas to misperceive our army's ability to and willingness to fight. It was the anti-judicial reform mobs that did that dirty work. Bibi was in his right. This conservative government ran on this program. They were, as I asked, 4 Air Force officers, reserve, who were leading the resistance to the judicial reform program within the Air Force. You know, we won't fly if this program is enacted. And I asked them three simple questions. Did we have a free and fair election? Yes. Did you guys lose? Yes. And why don't you get over it? I won't dignify their answer. Basically, it boiled down to, we have the right. We are progressives. We know what's good for you. That's the big difference between liberals and progressives. The progressives are totalitarian. They will tell you what's good for you, and they will force you to adhere to it.
It's actually worse than that, Jonathan, because these people that you describe, who have for years essentially been involved in an insurrection against all legally wielded power in this country. We're talking about an insurrection which involves the military, the security services, the juristocracy, etc., etc. The entire Israeli deep state, which is extremely powerful and completely and thoroughly networked. In other words, these people know each other personally.
Correct.
Not just the very few at the top. We're talking about thousands of people.
Correct.
And it's worse than what you described, because it's unlike in many other countries where you also have a deep state in many countries, such as in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, there in the United States, the president, when he enters office, does in fact have a lot of power and is able to shake things up and change many things, as Trump is doing as we speak.
Correct.
An Israeli prime minister, any Israeli prime minister, and particularly the current one, do not possess such powers. That's number one. Number two, we already mentioned Netanyahu's paralysis for whatever reason, which is not something that is new. And beyond all of this, and this is the main point that I'm trying to make, the people who hate Netanyahu are do not just make up the deep state. They truly believe that the state of Israel is theirs, that it belongs to them, as if it's written in the land registry. Correct. On their name. They say, we built it, our parents did, and you guys are just guests at best. That's really how they view things completely. It's not an exaggeration.
One aspect of this deep state that Bibi should have had an ability to root out was the general staff, the courts, the general staff, the media. These are the elements that the deep state use to impose their will on the rest of us. Bibi had an opportunity, he had his defense minister in there to literally clean at least that part of the deep state out. Coming in the wake of October 7th, he would have had the mandate to do it. But what did he do? He instructed Israel Katz to appoint 3 high-ranking officers who were all associated with that misconception that led to the massacres of October 7th to be the new chief of staff, the Ramatkal, the deputy chief of staff, and the new director general. What is that all about? Well, he wants peace and quiet. So even though, like, as you point out quite correctly, one of Begin's greatest mistakes, apart from Yamit and Camp David, was not availing himself of the opportunity to root out the deep state. Well, Bibi had an opportunity just now, a little opportunity to do just that within the army. And he walked away from it. Walked away.
He also completely dropped the ball even before the current war began a year before, that is to say November 2022, according to the Gregorian calendar, when the current government was voted into power, Netanyahu could have immediately dismissed the Attorney General, who was
Correct.
appointed very hurriedly in a very dubious manner, shall we say, by
But
the
with undemocratic, put it
by
mildly.
the previous government. And one of the senior members of the committee that appointed her, a former Supreme Court judge, Grunis, explicitly stated that
That
this
she was
woman,
unfit.
that she's unfit and unqualified and inexperienced for this position, which is objectively true. So he, at that moment in time, he had all possible reason and justification, and it would have been viewed as legitimate had he dismissed her immediately. But as usual, he refused to pull the trigger. And there were people who said
Correct.
this explicitly at the time. For example, the very vocal and very both amusing sometimes in a positive sense, but also very impressive woman, Tali Gottlieb, a member of Knesset,
Hmm.
of the Likud
I
party.
happen to like her.
I like her also. She's she she calls it like it is, and she speaks her mind, and she's afraid of no one. And she's a
Correct.
lawyer. She's a lawyer, a knowledgeable, experienced lawyer. And she immediately, when the government was voted into power with a very substantial majority, she immediately said the very first thing that they must do is dismiss the
Get
Attorney
rid of her.
General. And what did he do? Nothing. Precisely nothing. It's very difficult, therefore, to know what to make of this mysterious individual, Benjamin Netanyahu. One never seems to be able to pin him down. He's extremely elusive and slippery, like some kind of an eel, and it's truly impossible to know what's going on inside his head.
Shapeshifter. That's why his father, Ben Sion, on numerous occasions expressed the opinion that he was unfit to be the Rosh HaMemshalah, the prime minister. I didn't say it. You didn't say it. His own father said it repeatedly. He knew him.
Yes, yes, as we have mentioned on previous occasions, and yes, that is true. And let us hope that there will be some unforeseen and unpredictable developments in our political constellations here in Israel.
I
Because
hope so.
Until that happens, it's difficult to know, or to it's difficult to be terribly optimistic and
I
under
know.
the current leadership.
I know from my own experiences in trying to develop a party here, or just recruit people to join a party, that there is such lethargy. There is such
Despondency.
a
People are
feeling
very,
dysfunction.
it's very incredulous that anything very meaningful, positive can be done.
Everybody's telling me, don't get into the swamp. And I ask them in response, if everybody felt that way, they win. There's one last issue I thought we might discuss, and that deals with the government, our government's efforts to reestablish the Russian military bases in Syria. Honestly, love, I thought I was in another dimension, another universe when I read these stories. I thought it was Purim spiel. We all know that the Turks are coming to have replaced the Iranians in Syria, and they are far more dangerous than the Iranians ever were, for any number of reasons. And our initial reaction to this threat was a very good one. We eliminated most, if not all, of the Assad regime's heavy military equipment. We expanded our security zone along the Golan. We gave security assurances to the Druze, up to and including annexation. That's not off the table yet. And we occupied, or I say liberated, the Syrian Hermon, the Syrian peak of the Hermon. These are all good things. The problem is it's not dynamic enough. And people apparently are so scared of our inability to deal with Erdogan's oft mentioned desire to turn Syria into a province, if you will, a caliphate, part of the caliphate of a neo-Ottoman empire, that we have now sent an intelligence delegation to Washington with a white paper asking for help from the Trump administration to bring the Russians back to their naval base near Latakia at Tartus and their air base in Khmeimim. We've also sent, I just read about this, Bibi's military secretary, he's a Major General Roman Goffman, to Moscow, ostensibly to talk about Maxim Karkin, one of our hostages in Gaza, but that's his ostensible mission, but his actual mission is to lobby the Russians to come back. Now, we spent years trying to get rid of the Russians. And at one point, the Russians were playing Iran off against us by one day supporting us and one day supporting them. And they seemed to have a somewhat inhibiting effect on the Iranians because they wanted to be the masters of Syria, not the Iranians. Well, that all changed when the war started in Ukraine, with Ukraine. And given the outsized role that Iranian drones and other military equipment are now playing, and this new military treaty that's been signed between the two countries, there's no way that we suddenly realize that the Russians are going to play fair up there with us. So now, I don't see how in the world, given Russia's support of Hamas, open support of Hamas, and given the new government, the Salafi government in Damascus, the HTS government, if you will, and their justified animosity to the Russians, or Erdogan and the Turks, for example, that just voted against the Russians at the UN over the resolution that we were supposed to vote in favor of, with the American and Russian resolution absolving Russia of having caused the war against Ukraine. The Turks aren't going to allow that. All this is showing right now, the Turks, is that we're so scared of them that we're actually trying to bring back the Russians. What Trump will do, I don't know. The thinking from what I was told today is that given Trump's alleged very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, that he could be counted on to support this initiative. But you know what? It's not Russia's call. It's not our call. It's not Trump's call.
It's clearly
Turks,
an insane policy to return the Russians to their former bases in
the
Syria.
term I use is it's imbecilic. It's imbecilic. Okay, the Turks are now going to be training the HTS militia to be regular conventional soldiers. Okay. Erdogan has offered to establish an air patrol, defensive air patrol over all of Syria, presumably aimed at us. And the Turkish Navy is now sniffing around Tartus, looking as to where they could set up shop. These are all okay. I understand this. Key to this problem up north is getting rid of Iran. We have to start taking the threats of the multi-threats off the table. you get rid of Iran.
That is one major concern, obviously, and another policy initiative should have been put on the table by Israel many years ago, if not decades ago, and that is the complete dismantling of the Sykes-Picot
they won't do it.
Map drawing exercise in the Middle East, which of course is one of the major reasons for all the conflicts in the Middle East.
And the same reason in Africa.
But now we do have an opportunity, if we were to simply state that all those former colonial British and French agreements and ridiculous lines they drew on a map in 1916, all of that has to be relegated to the trash history, and everything has to be rethought and redrawn. And now is the time would be the time for a true Jewish leader to stand up and make those obvious and necessary comments and suggest practical steps to begin implementing such a policy.
And while we're at it, to point out that Britain's illegal surgical removal of Transjordan from the mandate should also be reversed.
Which was a clear contravention of binding international law.
100%. And nobody's ever made that point.
But actually, I do know, I was in contact decades ago with an elderly gentleman who's no longer alive, but who was an expert in this field, and he wrote a book on the subject even. I'm not sure I can recall his name at the moment, but he did write a book on the subject, and it's available, I believe, on Amazon, and describing the legal frameworks and legal infrastructure that underpins all that all the various agreements and treaties and maps that were drawn up at that time, what their legal status exactly is. And this is something that again, if Israel's foreign ministry was worth a penny, would be discussing and promoting every day, basically. Jonathan, I think we'll leave it there for today. Let us hope that the Jewish people finally will, before too long, receive the kind of leadership of which they are, which they so richly deserve.
Amen.
Thank you, Jonathan, my friend. Be well. And I wish the same to all our viewers, of course. Shalom u'nitzachon, peace and victory over all our enemies, foreign and domestic. Shalom, shalom.
Amen. Shalom.